Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar to go through bank pay for Blackbaud for Financial Edge users. Again, as introduced a couple different times now, right? My name is Nick Arkins. And I've got Tammy Bower here on the line who will be taking us through the demonstration today. Tammy, next slide, please. But really, guys, I think what everybody's interested in learning about today, right, is, what is bank pay, right? And why should it matter to everybody on the line? But bank pay is really just, banking and payments, a functionality payment solution that we've offered that is available in 180 different countries. And so the payments that are, going out, and payment tracking and global banking in one place. So that way you guys get to have those banking relationships with your banks today. And then, of course, payments are integrated into your existing setup through your existing bank. So the whole preface here and vision is you guys can combine this with our full procure to pay software, from anywhere from procurement to PaperSave, as some of you may know us from the invoicing side. And then again, we're going to be touching on the payments piece here. So they can all be standalone, or if you are just interested in the payment side, we are able to offer that as a solution for your organizations today. And then, of course, we're open to all customers. And something to really call out over there, we were the 2024 Blackbaud Integration Partner Award, just something we're really proud of. So there's no integration issues with our bank pay solution. Really would like to focus in on that. If anybody has any integration questions, please feel to drop them in. Next slide for me, Tammy. So again, pretty much the last piece before we jump in, again, why this is important. So think about this of all your cash is all in one place, right? Integrated transaction automation with multiple payment types that are going to be going out of bank pay, from including check, ACH, and wire. Your suppliers can be paid within the same day with touch-free billing. Of course, rapid payments with just a few clicks of a button. Payments are going to be processed right after invoices are approved. Then they're going to be eliminating that manual process of downloading and upload payment batch files, right? And then again, already touched on it, but straight from your bank, transactions are going to be made through your existing bank for security purposes and ease of use. And then, of course, many other solutions offer third-party non-banking providers, which is potentially opening you up to fraud. So in that nice little 4-row column there, so PaperSave Bank Pay, directly integrated with your bank connection, direct cybersecurity, right, for more security from that feature overall, check floating, and of course the ERP integration to tie it all into one. I'll turn things over to Tammy, and she's going to go through the demonstration today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. And again, as Nick said, it's good to see some recognizable names on the attendee list. And then, of course, there's a lot of you that are new to the PaperSave suite of products. So I'm going to do a little overview today and then dive into the PaperSave Pay bank pay solution. But PaperSave is a procurement to pay. So we're going to kind of take this demo or this webinar from the last step of getting your invoices approved through PaperSave, which is the accounts payable invoice automation tool offered by PaperSave. And so what you're looking at right now is my homepage. And of course, depending on which suite of products that you have from PaperSave, you may have some of these tiles on your homepage. You may not have all of these. You might have one. You may just have bank pay if you're just going to use FENXT and that solution. But we do have a lot of offerings here. And I'm actually going to go into the workflow because I'm going to kind of start at the end of the process of approving an invoice and talk through what really happens there. And so I'm going to open up this. You're going to see a Visio chart here. And as I mentioned, PaperSave is the solution that actually offers the invoice processing through an approval workflow. And we're not going to go through that. We're actually going to stop here at this last step. That's where I'm going to kind of take it through. But this last step, because of that accounts payable automation tool, from this step, when an individual hits submit, it's going to automatically create that invoice transaction inside of FENXT. The document then is going to move over to the payment processing part of this demo today. Again, if you're using Pearsoft's PaperSave AP automation tool. If you're not, then we can also look to your FENXT invoice transactions and pull in transactional information into this step of the workflow to get those payments approved, right? A lot of different payment solutions make you build a batch with inside of either the ERP or outside of that. And then there's really no audit trail in who's approving that batch. You might not be able to reject or approve just a portion of those. You have to reject the whole thing and start over. I'm going to show you whether the document is coming through the full Pearsoft approval process with the invoice, or we're pulling it right from the data inside of FENXT. You're going to be able to have a workflow that allows an individual to build a batch of invoices that need to be paid that day or in the next day or two, send it over to an individual for approval. You can have rules that might escalate an invoice by a dollar amount, or maybe a coding based on a fund or a grant. 2 people need to approve that, 3 people. You can have those rules where that document then, or that payment request, will automatically go to those higher levels of approval. And then once that level of approval is done, whatever volume it is, 1, 2, 3 levels of approval, your job is done. That's where Pearsoft's Bank Pay steps in, and we communicate with your bank. We take all of that vendor information, how the vendor wants to be paid, all of that routing information. We prepare that file to go off to your bank from one bank account or multiple bank accounts, for whether they're checks, wires, or ACH. All of that can be done in one batch. And so I'm going to kind of take you through that. Again, we're going to start here by creating an invoice transaction inside of FENXT, and then we'll go to the bank pay. All right. So if I'm that last person in that very first step of approval processes, I'm going to go into my workflow. Now, this is one thing as a user preference, I like to see this, and this really is from an accounting standpoint. In that workflow, I have 60 invoices. They total just over $101,000 based on due dates that we have captured from the invoice, or calculating it based on terms. We can know what invoices are due when, and what the dollar expectancy is for those invoices in those different time periods. But I can also see here that I have 44 invoices sitting in my payment review, waiting for a batch to be built, right? But we're going to start over here at this submit to FENXT. So here I am. I just use my slide bar to get over to my 3 invoices that are 5, I think it is, that I need to approve 3. All right. So let's look at this ResNet. This is an invoice. It's been brought into the system. It's gone through the full approval process, and we're not going to spend any time on that. But when I hit submit to FE, immediately PaperSave is going to communicate with FENXT and create that invoice transaction. And then this document then will seamlessly move from this step to this step, waiting for that batch to be built and it to be included into a batch. But at this point, all I have to do is hit submit. PaperSave is going to take all of this data, my GL distribution, all of this, and immediately create that transaction, right? And I get the next one in the stack. So if I go over to FENXT, look into payables, it might take a second or 2, but that ResNet might be the first one on the top here. But it will immediately go in and create that transaction. Here it is, ResNet. And of course, because of our tight integration with inside of FENXT, PaperSave becomes a tile on the invoice transaction. And of course, I then also get to see that document. So here's the document that I literally just submitted and created the transaction. So here's that workflow. And again, this is at what is the time? 2:42, 2:41 that this transaction was created. So when I say PaperSave is instantaneously creating those transactions, it is, it's real time. Now you'd have to go in and post it just like normal, but now we're going to go over and build that batch. So think about if you're using PaperSave, right, and you already have our AP automation tool, there's just an extension onto your workflow. Instead of that document moving over to what would be called a completed or an entered step, it moves over to the payment approval workflow. Again, whatever that process is, you saw what mine is. If you're not using PaperSave and you want to use Pearsoft Bank Pay as a standalone, we'll just look to those invoice transactions that you've manually created, and we'll pull that data over into a document so that you can filter based on any of those user-defined profile fields that you want to build your batch off of. So if I'm in this payment review step, I kind of want to step back and say, all right, think about how you're building your batch now, building that payment journal that you're going to give to somebody, the treasurer, the controller, whoever, that then reviews that batch and says, yes, we want to pay these, or maybe they cross through the ones they don't want to pay. And now you have to go back and remove those from the batch and then submit them. And if you're doing all of this in-house, printing your checks, then you have to print the checks. Maybe you have to take that back to that person to sign. And if there's more than one signer required because of the dollar amount, you have to take those checks and send them over to that second signer. And it's a lot of manual process. We're going to do this really in 2 steps. So here's where I've got my 31 invoices that have gone through the approval process, or we've pulled that data from FENXT. And now I want to choose the ones I want to pay. Listen, maybe I want to pay by dollar amount. I can filter this list by ascending, descending order, right? And maybe I want to pay everything that's over a certain dollar amount. Maybe I want to filter and say, all right, give me everything with a due date that is equal to or less than or equal to, and maybe I want to go out to Friday, right? Or maybe I want to go all the way to Monday. I can pick that date, apply. I've now narrowed down 31 invoices to 11. And you'll notice as I've done that, my quick measures change up here. I can see the total amount of these 11 invoices. I can see the largest. I can see the oldest, and I've got some really old invoices. But if I do that again and come back, you'll notice that if I refresh this, those numbers now are much larger because I've got all of those invoices waiting for them to be paid. But let's go ahead and let's build that batch. And again, I'm just going to do it by dollar amount, or excuse me, by due date. You can do it by dollar amount, maybe by bank account. Where do you want to pay this out of? Due date. You can have a combination of filters here. I'm just going to narrow it down again to the let's go out again to the 16th. All right. So once I've built this batch, I'm now going to send it over to my approver. Who is that approver? Again, that's going to be determined by your workflow, right? As soon as I send that over to the approver, they can immediately get an email saying, hey, you've got invoices sitting in your payment approval queue waiting for you to approve. So if I filter this or clear that filter, there are the ones that are remaining that I am waiting for next week to pay, right? So I'm going to, again, I have all the rights in my system. So now I'm going to be that payment approver. So if I come back to this Visio here, I just built the batch. I'm now the payment approver. And what's nice about PaperSave's payment approver, they can, again, filter. Maybe when they get that paper batch journal or report, maybe they only are really interested in seeing the invoices that are over a certain dollar amount. Well, they can just look at those one at a time, right? They can look at the ones over a certain dollar amount, see who's approved them, when it was approved. They can see all the coding that was used to create the transaction inside of FENXT. And then they can hit approve, right? And go to the next one. And maybe only look at those that are, again, over that threshold dollar amount that they're most concerned about. They don't have to look at every single one of them. So we're going to go ahead and just look at the ones that are over $1,000, right? So then once it gets under $1,000, then that individual can go, oh, maybe I want to look at the by vendor, and I can filter it this way and go, oh yeah, McGee, let's look at McGee. And you can pick and choose. Or maybe you go, we're not paying McGee, we're going to reject this one. And I have to tell why I'm rejecting. Not happy with service or something like that. And so we're going to hit reject. And it does require me to put in that comment. And so I rejected McGee. It's going to go back into the queue, right? And based on the comment, maybe it goes back to accounting to, look at the services and so on. But now we're going to send this to those 10 and we're done. We're done unless, of course, some of those invoices met a dollar amount that needed multiple approvers, which mine over 1,000 do. So these now are in Sammy's queue as executive approval. And again, I have a rule that says 1,000. So again, they can hit approve. And your job is done. In terms of building that batch, getting the approval, printing the checks, stuffing them in the envelope, sending them out, you don't have to do any of that. Your job is done. And as soon as you've done that portion, the data actually goes in two directions. One, it goes over to the PaperSave, a bank pay solution, where we are compiling the file for your bank. We're verifying that we have all of the information that we need on your vendors. If it's a check, how they want to get paid, or the address, the remit to address. If it's ACH, do we have the routing information? All of that's being validated, compiled, and then that file in its entirety is going to go over to your bank, whether or not it's one bank account that's paying them or multiple bank accounts. I know that with some organizations that offer bank paying, you can only pay out of one account. With PaperSave Bank Pay, you can pay out of as many bank accounts as you have, and those batches can be included, including all of those bank accounts, different types of payments, different vendors, nationally, internationally, and so on. But that's happening now. And then the other direction that the document or that data goes, it goes into a pending payment file, waiting for that validation to happen from the PaperSave Bank Pay. As soon as that happens, these invoices will then be identified and marked inside of FENXT as paid. Now, this could take anywhere between 5 to 15, 20 minutes, depending on the size of the file, but it will happen within that period of time, and you will see these get marked up. But real quick, we're going to come back out here to my invoices, and I'm going to show you what happens. And we're going to filter by, let's do by paid. And I'm just going to show you what happens. These were paid last week, I guess, when I ran this. So let's look at this and I'll show you what happens. So we come into the invoice transaction and we mark it as paid. Again, there is the payment. Here is the payment transaction information. And then of course, here's the document. And what happens is that every payment is going to get an ID, right? And that ID is going to be put into the workflow. We are also going to be updating these fields over here. Where was it paid from? Which bank account? How was it paid? Check. When was it created? Right now, it's showing that it's in process. You have to know that I really don't pay anything, but when it's settled, it will say settled, meaning that the vendor supplier has received the funds. And then this reconciliation number or payment ID number is also shown here as well. So it becomes a filterable field. That's what that is called, a profile field in PaperSave. It goes into the workflow from an audit standpoint. If I came into my completed steps and, oops, I've hidden them. Hold on just a second. And I go into my completed, these are all of the documents that have gone through the approval process. And if I go into any of these, and let's see if I can find the one I just did. That's okay. We'll just open up this one. Again, that document shows up in the completed step of the workflow with that reconciliation or payment ID number. All right. So we've completed the process of getting the document through the approval process. We're going to come out here to PaperSave's homepage. And we're going to go ahead and go into the bank pay. This is the portal that the file is sent to. Now you're going to see the word APRO. So remember I said that PaperSave has multiple products, suite of products, much like Blackbaud, right? They have Blackbaud, Blackbaud's the company, and they have FENXT, RENXT, BBCRM. PaperSave has procurement, PaperSave, APRO. They're all part of our suite of products. So I'm going to type in my username here and log in. And this is the bank pay solution. I'm going to go into payments and I'm going to show you what happens. Now, again, keep in mind that I don't really pay anything. So that file I just created of what, 14 payments, I believe it was, really didn't show up here. So we're going to look at data that I already have in this demo portal. All right. And let's filter by sending here. All right, we're going to go into this particular batch. So what happens is when the batch comes over, again, there's that time that the file is being built, right? Once it's done and authorized, everything looks good, it's going to send it over to the bank. And so when I click on, let's look at this one here. When I click on this one, every payment batch, so that batch of 14 will get a payment ID batch ID, right? But then each one of those payments will get their own, we call it a check number, but it's really that payment ID number. So there's a batch payment ID number, which right here in this case is 1029. But the invoice that we're paying Dell, or the payment that we're paying Dell, has this number here. Amazon will have its own. So if those 15 or 14 that I just sent over, they'll each have their own payment ID, or we call it a check number. And that's the number that's going to correspond with inside of the PaperSave Bank Pay on the workflow audit trail. It's also going to be in those profile fields, and that's what's going to give you that reconciliation information. But all of this information is being pulled from your data of source, which is your FENXT, right? And this is the validation area. If Dell was getting one payment, but there were 4 invoices included in that payment or in that batch. So if I come back here, I don't know if my batch had more than one. Let's come back out here. Let's come here. Let's go to that payment pending. So I'll filter by this. Do I have one that has multiple? So for instance, this PPG architectural, right? It will have one check number or payment ID, but both of those invoices would be listed here individually. Dell only had one, so there's nothing that's showing up there, right? So, but if this was the PPG, I'd see both of those invoices here, but they'd get one payment. Of course, if your vendor is requesting that they want individual payments for every invoice, that can happen as well. But what's important is that you're going to have that control over how your vendors are being paid. Check, ACH, wire. We're not going to dictate that to you. You can submit the full batch. You can reject individual items. And that information is being drawn out of your bank as individual payments, not as a lump sum. There's no holding of that money for a 24-hour period. As soon as that wire hits your bank and the bank processes it, then the funds are withdrawn. As soon as that check is cashed by the vendor supplier, then those checks, that dollar amount is withdrawn. So I think that that's what's really important to know, some of the differences between some other offerings and what PaperSave Bank Pay brings to the table. You have the control of when you're going to pay these, how you're going to pay them, and those individual payments are withdrawn from your multiple checking accounts when the cash is dispersed and received by the supplier. One of the other things, let me go back out here, that I think is important, and I think we have a couple minutes left here. I want to show, I talked about this particular dashboard, but we also have a historical dashboard that will allow you to drill down into this information and see things that were paid last year, this year, quarterly, monthly. I can go into all 433, or maybe I just want to go in and see, gosh, why were there $32,000 worth of late past due payments, right? This is before I was Johnny on the spot with my payment, but I can say, let's view these. And here are the invoices that were processed and completed in that time period, right? So if somebody wanted to see these, I could share that information with them via email. But more importantly, I think from an audit standpoint, you're going to have that complete audit trail. If you have PaperSave's AP automation tool, who approved it, when was it approved, the transaction that was created inside of FENXT, along with who approved all of the payments processing, and then of course what that payment process ID number is, along with all of this information, when it was paid, how it was paid, has it been cleared, all of that good stuff. All right, we are now down to the last of our time here.